Ethan Blake had spent years believing his ex-wife disappeared because she wanted his money more than she wanted him. That lie shattered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. From the back seat of his limousine, the billionaire noticed a barefoot girl sitting beneath the awning of an abandoned shop, teaching his 7-year-old daughter how to solve a math problem. His driver slammed on the brakes. Ethan stepped out, furious and confused. His daughter was supposed to be at her private school across town. Then the child looked up. Around her neck hung a delicate gold pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Ethan stopped breathing. He had commissioned that necklace 8 years earlier as an anniversary gift for his ex-wife, Grace. Only one existed in the world. Before he could demand answers, a weak voice came from the shadows. "Emma, give the necklace back." Grace emerged wearing a faded coat, her face thinner, her hands trembling from the cold. The woman Ethan had once loved now looked like someone life had tried to erase. His mother had told him Grace left willingly after being caught stealing. She had called her a beggar, thrown her out of the mansion, and welcomed Ethan's mistress into the family home before the divorce papers were signed. But Grace's next words exposed everything. She had been pregnant when she was driven away. The homeless girl was Ethan's daughter. And the child beside her, the daughter he had raised with his mistress, already knew the truth. Ethan turned toward the limousine, where his mother and fiancée watched in stunned silence. His expression changed. He removed his engagement ring. Then, in front of the crowd, he made a decision so ruthless, so public, and so unexpected that everyone who had betrayed Grace knew their lives would never be the same again. Before this story continues, take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this remind us that appearances can hide painful truths, that wealth cannot replace loyalty, and that one act of compassion can restore a life destroyed by cruelty. By subscribing, you are not only supporting powerful stories, you are joining a community that believes the forgotten deserve to be seen, the innocent deserve justice, and no human being should be judged by the clothes they wear or the place they sleep. Ethan's engagement ring landed in a shallow puddle beside the curb. Vanessa Hart gasped from inside the limousine. Margaret Blake, Ethan's mother, pressed one hand against the tinted window as though she could somehow push the moment backward. "Ethan," Margaret called as she stepped out, "don't make a scene." He stared at her. For most of his life, those 5 words had controlled him. "Don't make a scene." His mother had said them when he was 11 and cried at his father's funeral. She had said them when he was 17 and wanted to attend a public university instead of the elite school she had selected. She had whispered them into his ear during his wedding reception when Grace's elderly aunt arrived wearing a dress Margaret considered embarrassingly cheap. Every time Ethan heard those words, he had obeyed. But the girl beneath the awning was still holding the necklace. His necklace. Grace's necklace. And her eyes were his father's eyes. Gray around the edges, blue near the center, with a tiny golden fleck beside the left pupil. Ethan had seen those eyes every morning in the mirror. "Who is she?" he asked. Grace lowered her gaze. "You already know." "No," Margaret interrupted quickly. "We know nothing about this woman or that child. Grace has always been skilled at creating dramatic stories when she needs money." Emma flinched. The movement was small, but Ethan noticed it. The child had heard words like that before. She knew the tone of someone who was preparing to reduce her entire life to a lie. Chloe, the 7-year-old Ethan had raised, moved closer to Emma. "She's telling the truth," Chloe said. Vanessa rushed forward and grabbed her daughter's arm. "You don't understand what you're saying." "I understand everything," Chloe replied. "I heard you and Grandma Margaret." Silence spread across the sidewalk. Even the rain seemed to soften. Ethan looked at Chloe, then at Vanessa. What did she hear? Vanessa's face had lost its color. She is a child. Children misunderstand adult conversations. I heard you say the letters should have been burned, Chloe said. You said Grace kept sending them. You said if Dad found out, he would leave us. Grace closed her eyes. Ethan felt the street tilt beneath him. What letters? Margaret stepped between him and the children. This is not the place for this conversation. It is exactly the place, Ethan said, because this is where you left my wife and daughter to live. Grace's face tightened. We didn't always live here. Her words were quiet, but they struck harder than a shout. Ethan looked beyond her into the abandoned storefront. Through the broken glass, he could see 2 folded blankets, a plastic container of clothing, 3 library books, and a child's school notebook protected inside a clear grocery bag. Emma noticed where he was looking. We were only staying here until Friday, she explained. Mom has an interview. The careful pride in her voice nearly broke him. Ethan had spent $40 million renovating the east wing of Blake Manor because Margaret complained that the original windows allowed in too much morning light. His daughter had been sleeping behind a broken window. A memory returned without warning. 8 years earlier, Grace had stood barefoot in the kitchen of their first apartment, flour on her cheek, laughing because the oven had stopped working halfway through baking Ethan's birthday cake. He had not yet inherited the full Blake fortune. His father was alive, the company was smaller, and Ethan still believed money was something that could be used rather than something that could use him. Grace had placed the unfinished cake on the table, with 1 candle in the center. One day, she had told him, "You're going to have everything." "I already do." He had meant it. Grace had smiled as though she believed him. Now she stood in front of him, wearing shoes so worn that the rain had darkened her socks. "How old is she?" Ethan asked. Emma answered for herself, 7, I turn 8 in 3 weeks. The date formed immediately in his mind. 8 years earlier, 3 weeks from that day, Ethan had been in London finalizing the largest acquisition in Blake Industries' history. Margaret had insisted he leave immediately after the accusations against Grace. "You cannot negotiate while that woman destroys your reputation," she had told him. At the time, Ethan believed leaving was strength. He believed that refusing to hear Grace's explanations proved he could not be manipulated. Now he understood that someone had manipulated him perfectly. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked Grace. Her eyes rose slowly. "I did." 2 words. Nothing Ethan had built in his entire life was strong enough to protect him from those 2 words. "I called your office," Grace continued. "Your number had been changed. I went to the company headquarters. Security removed me. I wrote letters every month for 2 years. When Emma was born, I sent photographs. When she took her first steps, I sent another letter. When she started speaking, when she got sick, when she asked why other children had fathers, I kept writing." Ethan looked at Margaret. His mother's expression remained controlled, but the fingers holding her handbag were trembling. "You received them," he said. "I protected you. From my child." From a woman who knew exactly how to use a child to regain access to your life. Grace laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You had a DNA test done." Margaret's eyes flashed. Ethan turned sharply. "What?" "She sent 2 men to the hospital after Emma was born. They collected samples. I never received the results, but your mother did." Margaret's silence answered before she could speak. Ethan's driver, Daniel Reed, had stepped out of the limousine. Daniel had worked for the Blake family for 26 years. He had driven Ethan to school, waited outside his college graduation, and brought him to the church on his wedding day. Now Daniel looked ill. "Mr. Blake," he said, "there are things you need to see." Margaret spun toward him. "You will say nothing." Daniel's shoulders straightened. "I have said nothing for too long." Ethan felt something cold move through his chest. Daniel reached into his coat and removed a small brass key. "There is a safe in the old carriage house," he said. "Your father used it for documents he did not trust the family office to keep. Your mother began using it after his death." Margaret took a step toward him. "You signed a confidentiality agreement." "I signed an agreement to protect the Blake family," Daniel replied, "not to help destroy it." Vanessa pulled Chloe closer. "We should leave." "No one leaves," Ethan said. His voice was not loud, but Vanessa stopped immediately. A small crowd had gathered beneath umbrellas. Several people held up their phones. Ethan had spent years being photographed at openings, galas, board meetings, and political fundraisers. He knew that by evening, this moment would be everywhere. For the first time, he did not care. He removed his coat and held it toward Grace. She did not take it. "I don't need charity." "It isn't charity." "What is it then?" Ethan searched for an answer and found none that he had earned the right to give. "It's raining," he finally said. Grace looked at Emma. The child was shivering. She accepted the coat and wrapped it around her daughter instead of herself. That simple choice told Ethan more about the last 8 years than any document could. He turned to Daniel. "Take us to the carriage house." Margaret stepped forward. "Ethan, whatever is in that safe has been removed." Daniel met her gaze. "No, Mrs. Blake, I moved it first." The carriage house stood at the edge of the Blake estate, hidden behind rows of ancient oak trees. Ethan had not entered it since his father's death. Margaret called it an unnecessary reminder of an outdated life and had repeatedly suggested demolishing it. Now Ethan understood why. Grace and Emma rode in a separate car that Daniel arranged through one of the household employees. Grace refused to enter Ethan's limousine with Margaret and Vanessa. Chloe insisted on riding with Grace. Vanessa tried to forbid it. Chloe looked at her mother with a calmness no 7-year-old should have needed. "You lied about Emma," she said. "I want to sit with someone who tells the truth." Vanessa released her hand. During the drive, Ethan sat across from his mother. Margaret stared out the window. "You are allowing emotion to cloud your judgment." "Did you receive Grace's letters?" "I received attempts to manipulate you." "Did you receive them?" "Yes." "Did the DNA test prove Emma was my daughter?" Margaret's jaw tightened. Vanessa stared at the floor. "Answer me." Margaret turned from the window. The test indicated a biological relationship. Ethan's hands closed into fists. "A biological relationship. Do not twist my words. I'm asking whether the girl sleeping in an abandoned store is my daughter." "Yes." The word was almost soundless. Ethan leaned back. Across from him sat the woman who had organized every birthday party he attended as a child, selected every school, approved every friend, and dismissed every girlfriend until Grace came along. Margaret had once claimed she would walk through fire to protect him. Apparently, she had been willing to throw other people into it first. "Why?" he asked. Margaret's eyes sharpened with something close to anger. "Because Grace was wrong for you. That was not your decision. You were becoming weak. You skipped board dinners to cook with her. You delayed acquisitions because she wanted you home. She convinced you that the company should create housing programs and employee scholarships. Your father built Blake Industries through discipline, not sentiment. My father approved those programs. Your father became sentimental near the end of his life." Ethan remembered his father sitting beside the hospital window during his final winter. Charles Blake had been a stern man who rarely apologized, but illness softened some parts of him and sharpened others. "Be careful of people who call cruelty discipline," Charles had said one evening. "They usually mean obedience." Ethan had assumed his father was speaking about business competitors. Now the memory returned like a warning delivered years too early. Margaret continued. Grace came from nothing. Her mother cleaned hotel rooms. Her father disappeared. She had debts, no social standing, and no understanding of the responsibilities attached to our family name. She loved me. She changed you. Yes, Ethan said. She made me better. Margaret looked away. At the carriage house, Daniel unlocked a side door swollen by years of moisture. Dust drifted through the air. Old furniture stood beneath white sheets, and framed portraits leaned against the walls like witnesses waiting to be called. At the far end of the building, behind an antique cabinet, Daniel uncovered a steel door. He handed Ethan the brass key. The code is your parents' wedding date. Margaret's face changed. Daniel, I'm sorry, he said, not for this, for waiting. Ethan entered the code. The safe opened. Inside were 5 boxes. One contained Grace's letters, each envelope marked with the date it had arrived. Another held hospital records, photographs, legal documents, and the DNA report. The third contained copies of payments made to people Ethan recognized: a private investigator, a security supervisor, Grace's former landlord, and a physician who had worked at the hospital where Emma was born. The fourth held documents involving Vanessa. The fifth was labeled with Ethan's name. He opened the letters first. The earliest envelope had been sent 3 days after Grace was removed from the mansion. Ethan, your mother says you refuse to speak to me. I know you are angry, but please listen before you decide what kind of person I am. I did not steal the bracelet. I have never taken anything from your family. There is something else I need to tell you. I found out this morning that I am pregnant. Please call me Grace. Ethan lowered the page. His vision blurred. He opened another. Ethan. She moved today. The doctor says the baby is healthy. I think she moves when I play the piano. Do you remember the little song your father liked? I am not asking for money. I am asking you to know your child. Grace. There were dozens. Some were angry, some were hopeful, some contained small photographs carefully taped to the page. Emma wrapped in a yellow hospital blanket. Emma smiling without teeth. Emma holding a wooden spoon. Emma standing beside a birthday cupcake with 1 candle. Ethan found a letter written when Emma was 4. She asked me why the moon follows us when we walk at night. I told her it follows people who need light. She wears the necklace you gave me. I know you may be angry about that, but I want her to have something that came from you. When she is old enough, I will tell her the truth. I will not teach her to hate you, even though some days that would be easier. Ethan pressed the paper against the table. Behind him, Grace said nothing. He had not heard her enter. Emma and Chloe stood near the door with Daniel. Ethan turned. I never saw these. I know, Grace said. How? Because if you had seen even one and still stayed away, I would not have survived believing that. Her honesty cut deeper than blame. Ethan opened the DNA report. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The test had been completed 7 years and 11 months earlier. Margaret had known almost from the day Emma was born. Vanessa had known too. Her signature appeared on a payment authorization connected to the private investigator. Ethan opened the 4th box. Inside were prenatal records belonging to Vanessa and a paternity test involving Chloe. He looked at the date. The test had been conducted shortly before his engagement to Vanessa. He read the conclusion twice. Ethan Blake was excluded as Chloe Hart's biological father. Vanessa moved toward him. That doesn't change how much you love her. Ethan looked at Chloe. The child's eyes were wide with fear. He closed the file immediately. No, he said, it doesn't. Chloe's shoulders lowered slightly. Whatever Vanessa had done, Chloe was innocent. Ethan had held her when she was sick, attended school performances, read bedtime stories, and taught her to ride a bicycle. Biology had been stolen from him once. He would not allow it to be used as a weapon against another child. He faced Vanessa. You told me the first test was inconclusive. I was afraid. You told me Chloe was mine. You were the only father she had. That may be true, but you built our family on a lie. Vanessa began to cry. Margaret did not. Instead, she moved toward the fifth box. Ethan reached it first. Inside was a sealed envelope in his father's handwriting. For Ethan, if Margaret ever forgets that love is not ownership. Ethan's throat tightened. Margaret stared at the envelope as though it were a loaded weapon. Your father was heavily medicated when he wrote that. Ethan opened it. His father's letter was only 3 pages long. Charles described concerns about Margaret's increasing control over Ethan's life. He wrote that she had begun interfering with company decisions, isolating Ethan from friends, and treating Grace as a threat. I have watched your mother mistake fear for wisdom, Charles wrote. She fears being abandoned, so she abandons others first. She fears losing control, so she calls control protection. You must not let her fear become your character. The final paragraph contained instructions. If Margaret ever used the family trust to harm Ethan's spouse or children, her authority over the Blake Foundation would be terminated. Control would transfer to Ethan and any legally recognized spouse or descendant he appointed. Daniel produced a notarized copy of the trust amendment. Margaret finally lost her composure. That document was never properly filed. It was, Daniel said, Mr. Blake instructed me to deliver copies to 3 separate attorneys. I kept one because he warned that someone might attempt to destroy the others. Ethan looked around the carriage house. The truth had not appeared suddenly. It had been waiting. In letters. In photographs. In legal records. In a necklace around a child's neck. Everything had been there, hidden behind the doors Ethan had never bothered to open. He turned to Grace. I believed them. Yes. I should have listened to you. Yes. I should have found you. Grace's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. Yes. He wanted her to tell him it was not his fault. She did not. And for the first time in years, Ethan was grateful that someone refused to make the truth easier for him. Margaret stepped closer. You cannot seriously be considering bringing her back into this family. Ethan faced his mother. She never left this family, you removed her. I saved you. You stole 8 years from me. I gave you a stable home. You gave me a performance. Margaret's face became cold. Think carefully, the board will question your judgment, the press will tear this apart, investors dislike scandal. Ethan looked at Emma. She was studying one of the photographs from the box. In it, Grace was holding her as a baby beside a window covered with frost. Emma looked up. Are you really my father? Ethan's prepared answers disappeared. He walked toward her, but stopped several feet away. I am. Why didn't you come? No boardroom negotiation had ever frightened him as much as that question. Because I believed something that wasn't true, he said, and because I didn't look hard enough for the truth. Mom said you didn't know. She was kinder to me than I deserved. Grace turned away. Emma touched the moon necklace. Do you want this back? No. You gave it to Mom. Yes. She gave it to me when we had to sell our other things. Grace looked at her sharply. Emma. It's okay, the child said. He should know. Ethan felt sick. What things? Our television, Mom's wedding ring, her piano. The piano. Grace had loved music since childhood. Her mother had cleaned offices at night to pay for second-hand lessons. Grace's old upright piano had been the only object she brought into their marriage that Margaret considered too unattractive for the mansion. Ethan had ordered it restored as a surprise. Grace had cried when she saw it. He remembered promising that no matter how large their house became, the piano would always have a place in it. Where is it now? He asked. Grace folded her arms. In the home of someone who could afford to keep it. Every answer revealed another promise he had failed without knowing it was being tested. Ethan turned to Daniel. Call Rebecca Sloan. Margaret stiffened. Rebecca Sloan was the chief legal officer of Blake Industries and one of the few executives Margaret had never been able to intimidate. Tell her to freeze every family-controlled account requiring my authorization. Tell her to begin an independent audit of the Blake Foundation, Margaret's office, and every payment in these boxes. Vanessa shook her head. You can't do this publicly. I haven't begun doing this publicly. He looked at Margaret. You will resign from the foundation today. I will do no such thing. Then the trust amendment will remove you. You would humiliate your own mother. You humiliated my wife when she was pregnant. You left her without a home. You hid my daughter. You paid people to keep them away from me. I did what was necessary. No, Ethan said, you did what was convenient. He instructed Daniel to take Grace and the children to a nearby hotel. Grace refused. I'm not letting you hide us in a suite until your lawyers decide what to do. I'm not trying to hide you. Then what are you trying to do? Ethan looked at Emma, then back at Grace. I'm trying to make sure my daughter sleeps somewhere safe tonight. Grace's expression softened for only a second. One night, she said. After that, Emma and I make our own decisions. You always will. Margaret laughed bitterly. She has trained you quickly. Grace stepped toward her. For 8 years, she had imagined what she might say if she ever stood before Margaret again. In some versions, she screamed. In others, she begged for an explanation. On the coldest nights, when Emma slept beside her in shelters where every sound felt dangerous, Grace imagined saying nothing and simply walking away. Now she looked at the woman who had called her a beggar. You were right about one thing, Grace said. Margaret's chin lifted. I did come from very little. My mother cleaned hotel rooms. I wore second-hand uniforms. I counted coins before buying groceries. But I was never ashamed of those things until you taught me that wealthy people could use poverty like an accusation. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You proved my concerns. No, you created the disaster you claimed to fear. Grace pointed toward Emma. That child has slept in shelters, church basements, borrowed rooms, and one broken storefront. She has missed meals without complaining because she knew I had missed more. She has helped younger children read. She has never taken what did not belong to her. She has more dignity at 7 years old than you have shown in your entire life. Margaret stepped back. Grace's voice trembled, but she continued. You called me a beggar because you thought the word made me smaller. It only showed how small you were willing to become. No one spoke. That evening, the photographs from the sidewalk appeared online. Billionaire abandons engagement after homeless child reveal. Secret daughter wearing missing ex-wife's necklace. Blake family scandal, EUPTS, outside abandoned store. Reporters gathered outside Blake Manor, the company headquarters, the hotel, and the carriage house. News helicopters circled above the estate. Ethan's advisors begged him to release a vague statement requesting privacy. He refused. For years, vague statements had protected people who harmed others behind closed doors. At midnight, Ethan sat alone in the hotel hallway outside Grace's room. She had not invited him inside. He did not blame her. Across the hall, Chloe slept in a second room with a trusted nanny. Vanessa had been asked to leave after attempting to take Chloe away without explaining where they were going. Ethan had arranged emergency temporary guardianship through the family court because Vanessa's actions and the documents in the safe raised concerns. He had no intention of separating Chloe from her mother permanently, but he would not allow the child to disappear while an investigation was beginning. The hotel door opened. Emma stepped into the hallway wearing oversized pajamas sent from a nearby store. "You're still here," she said. "Yes. Mom thinks you're waiting for her." "I am. She might not talk to you." "I know." Emma sat beside him. For several moments, neither spoke. "Do you live in a castle?" she asked. "Not exactly. Chloe says your house has 14 bathrooms." "That might be true. Why would anyone need 14 bathrooms?" Ethan almost smiled. "I have no idea." Emma considered this. "We had one bathroom at the shelter for 12 families." "I'm sorry." "You say sorry a lot." "I have a lot to be sorry for." She leaned against the wall. "Mom says being sorry is only the beginning." "Your mother is right." "She usually is." Emma touched the necklace. "Did you love her?" Ethan stared at the carpet. "Yes. Do you still?" Before he could answer, Grace appeared in the doorway. "Emma, back to bed." The child stood. As she passed her mother, she whispered loudly, "He takes a long time to answer easy questions." Grace waited until the door closed behind Emma. "Children deserve answers they can understand," she said. "I didn't know what answer you wanted her to hear. I don't want you saying anything because you think it will win us back." Ethan stood. "I know I can't win back 8 years. You can't win me like a contract either." "I know." "Do you?" Grace stepped into the hallway and closed the door. "When your mother accused me of stealing, you looked at me as though every person who had ever judged me for being poor had finally been proven right. You didn't ask why I would steal a bracelet when you had given me access to everything. You didn't ask why it was found in the suitcase your mother told me to pack. You didn't ask why the security camera stopped recording for exactly 22 minutes. I was angry. You were relieved." The word stunned him. Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Some part of you was relieved to believe her because loving me had started costing you something. You had to defend me at dinners. You had to disagree with your mother. You had to admit that the world you came from was not always good simply because it was expensive." Ethan wanted to deny it. He could not. Grace continued, "You loved me when love felt like escape, but when love required courage, you chose comfort." He lowered his head. She had found the hidden center of his guilt. Margaret had created the lie, but Ethan had accepted it because the lie allowed him to avoid a battle. "I was a coward," he said. "Yes. I don't want to be one anymore. That is your responsibility, not mine." She returned to the room. Ethan remained in the hallway until sunrise. The independent investigation moved quickly. Rebecca Sloan uncovered evidence that Margaret had directed foundation funds toward private investigators, false security reports, and payments to intermediaries. The bracelet Grace had supposedly stolen had been purchased through a shell company months later, proving the original item had never been missing. The bracelet placed in Grace's suitcase was an imitation. The mansion's former security supervisor admitted that Margaret paid him to disable the cameras. Grace's landlord confessed that he had been pressured to evict her after she continued writing to Ethan. The hospital physician who arranged the DNA test revealed that Margaret threatened to destroy his career if he disclosed the result. Each discovery reached Ethan like another echo from the past. He remembered Grace calling him in London during the acquisition. He had watched the phone ring. Margaret stood beside him and said, "If you answer, she will know she can always pull you back." Ethan silenced the call. For years, he had remembered that moment as the day he took control of his life. Now he understood it was the day he surrendered it. Vanessa eventually agreed to speak with investigators. She claimed Margaret orchestrated everything. According to Vanessa, she had been Ethan's assistant during the final year of his marriage and had secretly been involved with him emotionally, though not physically, before Grace was expelled. Vanessa had listened when Ethan complained that Grace did not understand the pressure he carried. She praised his ambition. She agreed with every decision. She became the quiet place where he never had to question himself. After Grace disappeared, Margaret encouraged Vanessa to move into the mansion under the excuse of helping Ethan manage public appearances. Months later, Vanessa revealed she was pregnant. She knew Ethan was not the biological father, but Margaret saw an opportunity. A child would create the image of stability the Blake brand needed after the divorce. "You already love her," Margaret told Ethan when he asked for a paternity test. "Why reduce love to a laboratory result?" The test was conducted anyway. Vanessa intercepted it. Margaret helped her replace it with a report claiming the result was inconclusive. Ethan proposed soon after Chloe's birth, but delayed the wedding repeatedly. Some instinct he could not name kept warning him that his life was being arranged around him. The wedding was finally scheduled for the following month. Margaret had planned every detail. Grace and Emma's appearance on that rainy street had not merely interrupted the wedding. It had stopped a machine that had been moving toward them for 8 years. Chloe revealed how she found Grace. 3 weeks earlier, she had entered Margaret's study while searching for colored paper. A drawer had been left unlocked. Inside, Chloe found a photograph of baby Emma wearing the moon necklace. On the back, Grace had written, "For Ethan, so he can see how much she has grown." Chloe recognized the necklace from a portrait of Grace that had once hung in the mansion's West Hall. Margaret had ordered the portrait removed, but Chloe remembered it because the woman in the picture looked kind. The following night, Chloe heard Vanessa and Margaret arguing. Vanessa wanted the letters destroyed before the wedding. Margaret insisted keeping them was necessary in case Grace ever attempted to expose them. Chloe wrote down the return address from one envelope. The address led to a church shelter, where a volunteer told her Grace sometimes visited a food program near the abandoned store. Chloe left school during recess, using the emergency money in her backpack to take a bus. She found Emma sitting outside with a notebook. Emma did not believe Chloe at first. Then Chloe showed her the photograph. The two girls had been talking for almost an hour when Ethan's limousine passed. "What were you teaching her?" Ethan later asked Emma. "Fractions. Why? She said she hates math." Chloe frowned. "I don't hate math. I hate when people explain it like I'm stupid." Emma nodded, "So I explained it differently." Ethan watched them sitting together at the hotel table. One daughter had grown up surrounded by luxury and lies. The other had grown up surrounded by hardship and love. Yet within an hour of meeting, they had chosen to help each other. Adults had spent years protecting wealth, reputation, and control. The children had protected the truth. Ethan's first public action came 3 days after the discovery. The Blake Foundation's annual gala was scheduled at Blake Manor. Margaret expected him to cancel it. Instead, Ethan announced it would continue. Nearly every major investor, journalist, donor, and board member attended. Rumors spread that Ethan would apologize for the private misunderstanding and confirm that the wedding would proceed. Margaret arrived wearing a silver gown and the calm expression she had perfected over decades. Vanessa came separately, accompanied by an attorney. Grace did not want to attend. Ethan did not pressure her. "This is not your shame to carry," he said, "but you decide where you want to be." Grace considered his words. That evening, she arrived wearing a simple navy dress Rebecca had helped her choose. The moon necklace remained around Emma's neck. The ballroom became silent when they entered. Some guests recognized Grace immediately. Others looked from Emma to Ethan and understood without explanation. Chloe walked beside them, holding Emma's hand. Margaret approached. "You are enjoying this," she whispered to Grace. Grace looked around the ballroom she had once called home. "No," she said, "that is the difference between us." At 9 o'clock, Ethan stepped onto the stage. Behind him was the Blake Foundation emblem, a gold bridge above the words, "Opportunity through Responsibility." For years, the slogan had appeared on brochures, while the foundation paid to keep Grace and Emma invisible. Ethan waited until every camera turned toward him. "My family has often spoken publicly about responsibility," he began. "Tonight, I need to speak about our failure to practice it." Margaret's face hardened. Ethan described the letters, the DNA test, the payments, and the false theft accusation. He did not share details that would invade Grace's privacy, but he accepted his own role without excuse. "My mother created a lie," he said. "Vanessa Hart helped preserve it. Several employees were paid to support it, but I believed it because I did not have the courage to question the people closest to me." The ballroom remained perfectly still. "I abandoned my wife when she needed me. I failed to search for my daughter. I allowed wealth, pride, and obedience to become substitutes for character." Grace watched from the back of the room. She had expected him to blame Margaret completely. Instead, he stood before the world and admitted that deception worked because he had been willing to believe it. That did not repair the past, but it was the first honest thing he had given her in years. Ethan announced that Margaret had been removed from all leadership positions in the Blake Foundation. An independent board would review every program and expenditure. He also announced the establishment of the Grace Initiative, funded initially with $200 million of his personal wealth. The initiative would provide emergency housing, legal support, childcare, employment services, and education assistance for women and families displaced by domestic or financial abuse. Grace's eyes widened. He had not told her. "The initiative will not be controlled by me," Ethan continued. "Its governing board will include housing advocates, former shelter residents, legal aid organizations, and people who understand these failures personally." He looked toward Grace. "The name is not meant to purchase forgiveness. Forgiveness cannot be purchased. It is meant to acknowledge the person whose dignity survived what my family did to her." Margaret rose from her seat. "This is insanity." Every camera turned toward her. Ethan looked down from the stage. No, insanity was spending 8 years protecting a family image while destroying an actual family. Margaret's voice rose. "You are giving away your father's legacy." "My father's final letter warned me about this exact moment." For the first time, genuine fear appeared on her face. Ethan revealed the final decision. Blake Manor would no longer serve as the private residence of the Blake family. The estate's main building would be converted into transitional housing and an education center for families in crisis. The East Wing Margaret had spent millions renovating would become childcare and counseling facilities. The ballroom where they stood would become a community learning center. Guests began murmuring. Margaret stared at him as though he had announced the destruction of the company. "You cannot take my home." Ethan's response was calm. "You took Grace's home while she was carrying my child." The decision was unthinkable to Margaret because the mansion represented everything she valued: status, power, permanence, and proof that she belonged above those she called beggars. Ethan was not selling it. He was giving it to the people she had spent her life refusing to see. Margaret walked out before the speech ended. Vanessa remained seated, crying silently. After the gala, she approached Ethan. "What happens to Chloe?" Ethan looked toward the girls, who were eating cake near the terrace. "She remains loved. You'll take her from me. I will not punish Chloe for what you did." Vanessa wiped her face. "I did love you. You loved the life you thought I could secure. That isn't fair. Neither was allowing me to believe Chloe was mine while helping hide the daughter who was." Vanessa lowered her gaze. "I was afraid Margaret would destroy me too." "She probably would have." Vanessa looked up, surprised by his answer. "But fear explains what you did," Ethan continued. "It does not excuse it." Vanessa eventually accepted a structured custody agreement. She retained a relationship with Chloe under supervision while the court reviewed the evidence. Ethan made it clear he would continue being Chloe's father in every way that mattered, provided Vanessa did not use the child to avoid accountability. Margaret refused to cooperate. She filed lawsuits challenging the trust amendment, the foundation audit, and the transfer of Blake Manor. She appeared on a television program and described herself as the victim of an ungrateful son manipulated by an opportunistic former wife. The interview ended badly when the host displayed copies of Grace's unopened letters. Public sympathy shifted further away from her. Former employees began telling their own stories. A housekeeper revealed that Margaret regularly withheld wages over minor mistakes. A driver said she fired him after learning his son had been arrested, claiming the family could not be associated with scandal. A foundation employee produced emails showing Margaret rejected a shelter partnership because she did not want homeless families near Blake-sponsored properties. The image Margaret protected all her life collapsed not because Ethan destroyed it, but because it had always been built on silence. Grace refused media interviews. She enrolled Emma in a public school with a strong academic support program and accepted a temporary apartment arranged through an independent housing organization. She would not move into Ethan's penthouse. She would not return to Blake Manor. She also refused direct control of the Grace Initiative. "I don't want a charity named after me to become another rich person's apology project," she told him. "What would you want it to become?" "Useful." The answer reminded Ethan of the woman he married. Grace had never been impressed by announcements. She cared about whether promises survived after the cameras left. She agreed to serve as a paid community advisor once the governing board was formed. Her first recommendation was to eliminate complicated application requirements that prevented people without permanent addresses from receiving help. Programs often demand proof of stability from people seeking help because they have none, she explained during the first meeting. It makes no sense. Ethan listened. He had spent years speaking first in every room. Now he learned to take notes. Rebuilding his relationship with Emma proved more difficult than writing checks or signing legal documents. She did not call him Dad. At first, she called him Mr. Blake. Later, she called him Ethan. He attended her school orientation and sat in the back because she did not want other children asking questions. He learned that she loved astronomy, disliked bananas, and read the final page of books first when she was nervous about the ending. He bought her an expensive telescope. She thanked him politely, but preferred the second-hand star map Grace had found at a library sale. Ethan felt rejected until Grace explained. She trusts things that have already survived someone else. The sentence stayed with him. One Saturday, Ethan took Emma and Chloe to a science museum. He arrived with private security, a reserved entrance, and an assistant carrying snacks. Emma stopped outside. "Why are all these people coming?" "To keep you safe." "Safe from what?" Ethan looked at the security officers. For years, Margaret had used protection as another word for control. He dismissed everyone except Daniel, who waited near the entrance. The girls spent 4 hours moving between exhibits. At the planetarium, the lights dimmed and stars appeared across the ceiling. Emma sat beside Ethan. "Mom said the moon follows people who need light," she whispered. "I read that in one of her letters." "You kept them." "All of them. Even the angry ones. Especially those." She was quiet for a while. "Do you wish I wasn't yours?" Ethan turned toward her. "No. Even though everything got ruined when you found me." "Nothing was ruined because I found you. Things were already broken. Finding you showed me where." Emma studied his face in the faint blue light. Then she slipped her hand into his. It was the first time she touched him willingly. Ethan did not move for the rest of the presentation. Grace watched changes in him cautiously. He sold the limousine in which he had first seen Emma. When she asked why, he said every time he looked at it, he remembered watching the world through tinted glass. He began visiting Blake Industries facilities without advance notice, speaking to cafeteria workers, warehouse employees, cleaners, and receptionists without executives arranging the conversations. He discovered that several employees working full-time still struggled to afford housing. 6 months later, Blake Industries introduced wage increases, expanded childcare support, and an emergency employee housing fund. Some board members objected. Ethan presented research showing that stable employees were more productive and less likely to leave. But privately, he understood the decision required no financial defense. It was simply right. Margaret once told him that empathy was expensive. Ethan learned cruelty cost more. It cost loyalty. It cost truth. It cost years that no fortune could recover. Almost a year after the rainy afternoon, the first section of Blake Manor reopened as Haven House. The marble entrance remained, but the gold Blake family crest had been removed. In its place was a wooden sign designed by children from 3 local shelters. A home should not be something you have to earn after losing everything. Grace had suggested the words. On opening day, families toured furnished apartments, classrooms, a legal support office, and a music room. In the center of the music room stood Grace's old piano. Ethan had spent months searching for it. The instrument had passed through 3 owners before Daniel located it in a house 2 states away. Ethan bought it back, but he did not have it delivered to Grace's apartment. Instead, he placed it where dozens of children could use it. Grace entered the room and stopped. Her hand rose to her mouth. "You found it. I made a promise that it would always have a place here. But you broke that promise." "I know." She walked toward the piano and touched the restored wood. "And now it belongs to the children." Grace sat on the bench. She pressed one key. The note echoed through the room. Emma and Chloe ran inside. "Play something," Emma said. Grace hesitated. She had not played in years. Then her fingers settled over the keys. The melody was the same simple song Ethan's father once loved, the song Grace had mentioned in the letters Margaret hid. Ethan stood near the doorway. For a moment, the years folded together. He remembered Grace barefoot in their first apartment. He remembered the unfinished birthday cake. He remembered the moon necklace resting against her throat. He remembered promising she would never face hardship alone again. The past could not be changed, but it could be faced without lying. After the song ended, Emma looked at Ethan. "You know this one?" "Yes." "Sit down then." Ethan joined them at the piano. He did not know how to play. Emma placed one finger over a key. "Start here." Grace watched him attempt the melody badly. She laughed. It was the first unguarded laugh he had heard from her since their reunion. He looked at her. The laughter faded, but the warmth in her eyes remained. Their reconciliation did not happen in a single dramatic moment. There was no sudden wedding, no easy declaration that love erased betrayal. Grace needed time. Ethan needed to prove that his changes would survive disappointment. They attended family counseling separately and later together. Ethan apologized without asking Grace to comfort him. Grace spoke about the years of fear, the shelters, the lost jobs, and the humiliation of being treated as though poverty proved dishonesty. Some sessions ended in silence. Others ended with anger. But they continued. 2 years after the truth emerged, Ethan and Grace stood outside Haven House, while Emma and Chloe planted flowers near the entrance. The sisters had become inseparable. Chloe spent alternate weeks with Vanessa, who had completed court-ordered counseling and begun working independently from the Blake family. Her relationship with Ethan remained complicated, but she no longer denied what she had done. Margaret lived alone in a smaller property purchased before her accounts were frozen. The criminal investigation resulted in fraud and obstruction charges. Some penalties were financial, others legal, but the consequence she felt most deeply was the loss of influence. She wrote Ethan repeatedly. At first, the letters accused him. Later, they defended her actions. Eventually, one arrived containing only 4 words. "I was afraid too." Ethan showed it to Grace. "Will you answer?" she asked. "I don't know." You don't owe her immediate forgiveness. "I know. But if you answer, do it because truth matters, not because guilt demands it." Ethan looked toward the girls. Grace had once been removed from his life because he allowed someone else to decide what he should believe. He would never surrender that responsibility again. Emma ran toward them, holding a small flower pot. "The roots are tangled," she said. Grace knelt beside her. That happens when something grows too long in a space that is too small. "Do we cut them?" "No, we loosen them carefully." Emma handed the plant to Ethan. "You do it." He separated the roots with his fingers. Some broke despite his care. Most remained intact. He placed the plant into a larger pot and covered the roots with fresh soil. Grace watched him. "Things can survive damage," she said, "but surviving isn't the same as returning to what they were." "I know. Sometimes they need a different place to grow." Ethan looked at her. "Is that what we're doing?" Grace smiled faintly. "We're trying." A month later, she agreed to have dinner with him without the children. Not as husband and wife. Not as a billionaire attempting to reclaim what he lost. As 2 people deciding whether the truth could become the beginning of something new. Ethan arrived early. He wore no expensive watch and brought no jewelry. Only a small box containing copies of every letter Grace had written, bound carefully in date order. I made a second set, he explained. The originals belong to you and Emma. Grace opened the first page. You read all of them. More than once. Why? Because you spent 8 years trying to tell me the truth. The least I can do is spend the rest of my life listening. Grace closed the box. There were tears in her eyes. She did not promise to remarry him. She did not say everything was forgiven. She reached across the table and took his hand. For Ethan, it was enough. The moon necklace remained with Emma. Years later, when reporters asked about it during the anniversary of Haven House, Emma described it as the object that connected 3 lives. Her mother wore it when love was still hopeful. She wore it when hope became survival. And her father recognized it when the truth could no longer be hidden. But Emma said the necklace was not the most important part of the story. The important part, she explained, is that my mom stayed kind even when people were cruel to her. Chloe looked for the truth even though she was scared. And my father finally chose to do what was right, even when it cost him the life he thought he wanted. By then, Haven House had expanded to 6 cities. Thousands of families had received temporary housing, legal support, education, and employment assistance. Every location included a music room. Each room contained a small crescent moon carved above the doorway. Not as a symbol of wealth, as a reminder that light often appears in the darkest places, and sometimes the people ignored by the world are the ones carrying it. Dear viewers, this story is a powerful reminder that no one should be judged because they are poor, homeless, struggling, or dressed differently from those around them. Grace lost her home, her marriage, and years of security because people with power believed their wealth gave them the right to decide her worth. Yet money did not make Margaret honorable, and homelessness did not make Grace a beggar in character. What defined them was how they treated people when no one could force them to be kind. If you believe innocent people deserve to be heard, children should never suffer because of adult greed, and true justice begins when we stop judging others by their circumstances. Kindly share this story with someone who needs its message. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories about truth, compassion, family, betrayal, forgiveness, and the courage to stand against injustice. Your support helps these lessons reach more hearts, reminding us all that the measure of a person is not what they own, but what they choose to do when another human being needs help.